Hi guys, it's me, Shazza and welcome to the Mexico City Grand Prix weekend. Hope you guys are well. Of course, we had the US Grand Prix last weekend, which was a competitive weekend. Maybe not the most exciting weekend that we've had at the Circuit of the Americas in the past, but was still an interesting weekend. Plenty of talking points coming out of that as we come into now the second part of the final triple header of the season here in Mexico City at the Autodromo Hermanos Rodriguez circuit. And yeah, looking forward to qualifying this evening, obviously for me in the UK and obviously us in Europe. If you're in North America, then obviously it'll be in the afternoon. But normally, qualifying in Mexico does tend to be pretty exciting. We've had some surprises in qualifying in terms of who ended up on pole position, and there has been a variety of different poles in terms of it being shared out, let's say, amongst certain teams. So this is not a qualifying session that is likely to be dominated by anyone in particular, and it should be at least a two-team fight for pole position, if not maybe three teams fighting for the all-important pole position here in Mexico. As we know, though, the races here in Mexico do tend to be, most of the time, pretty bad, I would say, and pretty predictable, to be honest, which is sad to say because the atmosphere at this Grand Prix is one of the best on the entire calendar. But yeah, sadly, the racing just does not live up to the atmosphere. But qualifying is, just as you can see, just under an hour and a half away. And it is going to be a competitive qualifying session, no doubt about that. Midfield looking very close, and also the front of the midfield look as though they might be able to mix it with one of the top teams. And then, yeah, when it comes to the very front of the grid, at least two teams we have fighting for pole, maybe three. We'll have to see, if a third team can properly join the fight. Obviously, once we get to qualifying, but hope you guys are well. No matter what time zone you're in, what part of the world you're from, hope you're all having as good a Saturday, the 26th of October, or maybe even Sunday, the 27th, depending on, if you're in Australia, for example. Hope you're all doing as well as possible. Obviously, for us in the UK, this is the last day before the clocks go from BST to GMT. And winter is almost upon us. But yeah, looking forward to this session. I hope you guys are as well, and I hope you'll join me today in watching along and enjoying qualifying in Mexico. Before, though, we get into the build-up, which, as usual, we're going to go through what's happened so far this weekend, upgrades as well. We'll touch on that. Not many upgrades this weekend, but we'll still touch on it because there has been a couple for a couple of the teams. Yesterday, Friday practice was probably the least representative it's going to be all season long. And the reason that is because practice one, you had a lot of drivers sitting out because teams were allowing their reserve drivers to do the session. And then practice two yesterday, we had all of the race drivers in for the session, but as we have seen, I think now for the last, is it like 3 years or so, Pirelli use FP2 in Mexico to do their, they use that session as basically a tire test for next year. And yeah, FP2 yesterday, all the teams ran on the test compound, so there is absolutely no way of knowing from yesterday's FP2 running who truly was quick and who was not. Because again, with the Pirelli test compound, it does skew things quite a bit. So I've had to wait in terms of seeing and collecting data for this stream, I've had to wait until practice 3 to really see representative running that actually shows us maybe the pecking order for at least qualifying here in Mexico. And it's only one session, so it might be obviously quite a bit different once we get through qualifying, but it's the only thing we have to go off. And because practice 3 only finished an hour ago, unfortunately I don't have any sector time data from the session because it was just the session happened too soon ago, if that makes any sense, that I wasn't able to have the time to, collect the data and, get it put into graphics and put it on the stream. So the only thing we'll be able to do is go through the results themselves and try to interpret what it could mean for qualifying. So we'll go through the practice 3 results now. And not really surprising, McLaren were very quick in practice 3. First and second, Oscar Piastri quickest on a 1:16.4. Lando Norris just half a tenth behind. McLaren looking very quick, but Ferrari do have a bit more pace in the bag than they showed. They were looking very quick in the first half of the session. Leclerc didn't do the best of runs towards the end of the session, so he could have gone much quicker, I think, than he actually did. So Ferrari, I think, are McLaren's main rivals for pole position here today. McLaren, no doubt, have a very quick car, and I'm not surprised at all they've got a fast car here in Mexico because it was always going to be a good track for the McLaren car, especially with the way the middle sector is configured. But McLaren first and second, Carlos Sainz third, 0.3 of a second back. Again, with Leclerc, who was down in sixth, if he had done the absolute best lap he could have done, I think Leclerc may not have split the two McLarens, but he would have been probably a tenth of a second, maybe a tenth and a half away from Oscar Piastri in P1. So the pace between McLaren and Ferrari is close. Maybe we could say McLaren have got the advantage for, say, qualifying, which I would not really argue against that massively. But McLaren definitely, or not McLaren, sorry, Ferrari definitely are in the fight for pole. There is no doubt about that. And then in fourth place, the man who has dominated this Grand Prix, at least on the Sunday, Max Verstappen, fourth and half a second off the pace. And by the looks of it, that looks to be legitimate in terms of the lack of pace Red Bull have. They look to be, at best, the third best team, but that might not even be that might not even be confirmed that they are that quick. Might even be slower than Mercedes if Mercedes can deliver good enough laps in qualifying. We'll have to see. But unless Max Verstappen produces an unbelievable lap in Q3, or Red Bull have been sandbagging heavily and they've got actually a lot more pace in the bag, I do not see how Red Bull and Max Verstappen can take pole position. Now, of course, not a disaster, for the race if they do end up in fourth or fifth place, because obviously positions can be made at the start, but it is worrying for Red Bull just how slow they have looked at times, so far this weekend. And of course, Red Bull have had not the greatest amount of running this weekend, because I think it was practice 2, Max Verstappen didn't do a lot of laps because he had issues with his power unit, which Red Bull, because of that, had to swap that power unit out he was using and put in another one that he has used before, so he won't get a penalty for, going for a new power unit. But it is concerning. It is definitely concerning with Red Bull and um, not say Verstappen to a certain extent, but obviously Red Bull's lack of pace really is hurting Max Verstappen's results, and obviously preventing him from wrapping up the championship as easily as he should be in this, back half of 2024. Into this weekend, Max Verstappen obviously 57 points clear of Lando Norris. If Lando, let's say, gets pole position today and finishes, you know, first or second tomorrow, there's a good chance that Lando could gain 8 to 10 points, which is still a healthy enough, um, you know, it, not advantage in points, but it's still a good enough. What am I trying to say? Cut down in points, I guess you could say, with Norris in terms of him trying to cut the gap to Verstappen. That would be a healthy enough amount of points to cut for Lando that it would still put a lot of pressure on Red Bull and Max Verstappen, when from the drivers' championship side, it's really unnecessary at this point because Verstappen really should be, again, comfortably wrapping up the championship. But he's not really, by the looks of it, being given a chance to do that. But I mean, we'll see how the weekend plays out. Maybe Verstappen will be a lot better in qualifying, which obviously would help his effort tremendously. But again, if Norris ends up on pole and Verstappen is fourth or fifth on the grid, it's possibly going to get difficult again on the drivers' championship side. If Lando does take a lot of points out of Max Verstappen, the championship's still possible. I personally don't think Lando will win the championship because I don't think he can consistently score the points needed to, beat Verstappen to the championship. I think at this point, Lando needs to score or outscore Max by 11 points per race weekend for the rest of the season to win the championship. I don't see Lando being able to do that consistently, but it's still added pressure that really isn't needed at this point. But yeah, we'll see again whether there's any improvement going into qualifying. But if I'm a Red Bull fan, I would be concerned. No doubt about it. Lewis Hamilton then in fifth. I would be surprised if Hamilton was in the top 5 on the grid for qualifying. Not just because Hamilton's qualifying efforts for a lot of this season have been quite poor, but also Mercedes are not very quick. They look closer to Racing Bulls behind them, who look nicely competitive themselves. They look closer to them than they do McLaren. So if I'm a Mercedes fan, I'm not expecting anything coming into this Grand Prix. And as I said a week ago in my podcast, which, by the way, if you haven't checked out, make sure to check it out on my channel before we get into qualifying. I said Mercedes I didn't think would be quick here in Mexico, just didn't think the conditions suited them. And no surprise, they are quite far off the pace. So yeah, Lewis Hamilton in fifth. Leclerc sixth. Obviously, he will improve in qualifying. Yuki Tsunoda in seventh. Now, we remember last year, AlphaTauri were really quick at this Grand Prix. If you remember, Daniel Ricciardo finished, was it fifth, I think, in the race? Fifth or sixth, something like that. And he qualified, I think, fourth on the grid. And also, Yuki Tsunoda, I remember, either was going to finish in the points or he did. But I remember him also having a strongish pace, at least, in the race itself. They were very quick this time last year as a team. They were by far, the best midfield team at this Grand Prix. They don't seem to be as quick this weekend as they were a year ago, but they do still seem to be the quickest of the midfield teams. So Racing Bulls, if you're looking at the midfield, Racing Bulls are the team to watch out for, because if there's going to be a surprise in terms of a midfield car out qualifying a front runner, say in Q3, I think it's probably going to be Sonoda in the Racing Bulls. Sonoda, by the way, as well, 7th, and the lap time he did, which was a 1:17.3, I think it was. He did that on a set of medium compound tyres, when Max Verstappen in 4th, 0.3 of a second ahead, did his time on a set of soft compound tyres. Now, the difference between the soft and the medium in qualifying should be about 0.4 of a second in, obviously, in favour of the soft compound tyre. So, theoretically, it might be possible that Yuki Tsunoda could out-qualify Max Verstappen today. It could happen. Do I think it will? No, because I think Verstappen will be a bit too quick for that to happen. But Yuki Tsunoda, I think it is possible he could end up on the 3rd row of the grid. Obviously, I'll get into my predictions soon enough, which I are based on what we saw in practice 3. George Russell 8th. I think he will be quicker in qualifying than that, and quicker than Lewis Hamilton, I'm expecting. 0.3 of a second off he was in practice 3, but yeah, I think he'll be quicker in qualifying. He did have a big crash yesterday in practice 2 that he had to go to the medical centre for. It wasn't anything serious. It was just because his crash exceeded the, I think, some sort of G-force limit when it comes to crashes. So he automatically had to go to the medical centre. But, yeah, Mercedes, like I said, they are the slowest of the front 4 teams, which is not surprising in the slightest. And then, at the back of the top 10, you've got Haas F1 with Kevin Magnussen, which is pretty good to see, actually, because it does show that, obviously, with the upgrade they brought last week, which helped them be so quick, that I think in all types of conditions, they have got a quick enough car to be top 10 runners. Maybe not with both cars, but at least one car per race weekend at this point. They've got, again, that good enough car to be top 10 runners. And then Liam Lawson in the top 10. Obviously, brilliant race he had at the Circuit of the Americas last Sunday, finishing 9th after starting 19th, and capitalizing on the good pace of his car to be in the top 10. And Lawson, no doubt, a contender to get into Q3 later on. But we'll go through, definitely with the front of the field, we'll go through the pecking order soon enough. Just let's go to the bottom half of the order. And then you got Alexander Albon in the Williams. Williams looking decently quick, but just not top 10 worthy, I don't think. It's going to be close, though. They might be able to get in the top 10, but I don't think they're looking as likely to as, say, Haas or Racing Bulls are. So don't put your money on it, is what I'm trying to say. And then you've got Sauber in 12th place. For the first time in a while, they don't look shit. Valtteri Bottas, we do know, is pretty quick here. He did actually get a pole position here 3 years ago. But, yeah, good to see. Sauber look competitive. Zhou Guanyu, of course, 0.8 of a second back in 19th place. No surprise there. Zhou is a horrendous driver. But, yeah, good to see with Bottas that Sauber look like they're fighting with other teams, which is something they've not done, it feels like, for quite a few weeks. Franco Colapinto, 13th. Good to see Colapinto still on good pace. The sad news, though, and this is coming from Colapinto himself, is it sounds like he might not be on the grid for next year. Colapinto to Sky F1, I think, was it yesterday? was talking about how it looks like his options are closed and that he thinks he will probably be on the grid for 2026 or 2027. But from his view, he doesn't think he'll be on the grid next year. What an absolute, not just shame, but disgrace that we're going to have, potentially a driver that you could argue doesn't deserve to be on the grid any longer, still remaining on the grid another year ahead of Franco Colapinto, a new driver who has clearly shown he is good enough for Formula One. I really hope that Sauber are not going to be keeping Zhou Guan Yu in their car. I really, really hope not, because I will go ballistic if that's the case, because it is that would be one of the clearest cases of not just pay drivers undeservedly having a seat in Formula One, but it would be a massive injustice. It really would. If Valtteri Bottas is the one keeping his seat, that's a lot less bad than if Zhou keeps his seat, because Bottas at least has been comfortably better than Zhou this season, even though Bottas himself has also been pretty poor. So, yeah, I really hope, say with Sauber, I hope they've got a good excuse for why they're not putting Colapinto in the car. If it's because they're going to go with Bortoleto instead, who is another South American driver who's very good, then that's understandable to an extent, because Bortoleto could be as good, if not better, than Colapinto. So, again, it would be understandable to an extent, but from Sauber's point of view, surely they cannot keep either Bottas or Zhou. Surely not. Especially after this year where both drivers have offered them absolutely nothing in 2024. Sergio Perez, talking of offering their team nothing. 14th in practice 3, 7, almost 8/10 of a second slower than Max Verstappen. Now that is pretty special from Perez. I can't lie. Be 8/10 of a second slower than your teammate around a track that is only 76 seconds long in a Formula One car. That takes some talent. It really does. It really, really does. That is just an incredible loss of time from one driver to another in the same car. Perez, I mean, at this point, he's just absolutely finished, isn't he? Really. We're just waiting for Red Bull to finally trigger the moment to get rid of him. And it's sad to say that, because I've always been a fan of Sergio Perez. I've always liked the guy. He's had many great performances, many great days out there. But his day is done, really, at this point. And 14th in practice 3 is shockingly poor. He should be in the top 10 easily. That car is not that bad. It's not the best car on the grid, but it is not that bad that he is, should be in 14th. Absolutely no chance. And then, even more depressingly, Aston Martin, at best, 15th and 17th. Again, it's. I think we even said it at this particular Grand Prix last year. Just it is actually amazing how much pace they have lost over the course of just a few months. At the start of this season, they were part of that front-running pack to an extent. They were fighting McLaren, Ferrari here and there, Mercedes here and there. Obviously, if you go back to that Chinese Grand Prix in Shanghai, Fernando Alonso, was running in the podium positions, I think, for a time in that race, or he was, at least competing for them. And now, a few months later, 15th and 17th in practice. Now, to add some context, they have been doing some interesting testing of their, the parts they have. And with, what do you call it, Aston Martin, they've been running lots of different parts and specs of cars that they had at different points. In practice one, they were running a spec from earlier in the season, and then in practice two, I think both drivers were running the Imola spec. So they've just done a lot of testing and swapping of parts, and I don't know if it's done any benefit for the Aston Martin team, but from what they've shown in practice three, they look absolute dog shit going into this session. So maybe they can get a car into Q2, but no way are they going to be in Q3. Absolutely no way. Unless Alonso, goes full God mode. It's just not happening. Nico Hulkenberg 16th. You would expect a lot better than that, and Hulkenberg can definitely do better than that. He has had a couple decent results here in the past in Mexico. Remember once he was running in like 5th place ahead of, was it Kimi Raikkonen? I think at one point back then was it 2016? And then he spun late in the race and ended up finishing in like 6th or 7th place. And then he's had a couple other, I think, points finishes here as well. So Hulkenberg, if Magnussen's in the top 10, Hulkenberg should be getting himself in the top 10. No doubt about it. So watch out for Hulkenberg. I expect better once qualifying comes around. Lance Stroll, 17th. Can't really complain about his performance. It's really down to Aston Martin. And then the slowest team this weekend looks to be Alpine. They are not just slowest, but they are slowest by quite a margin. The next slowest team being Aston Martin, you'd have to say. Aston Martin look about half a second quicker. So, yeah, quite alarming because, a week ago, they were very quick with Pierre Gasly and they were contenders to finish in the points. And now suddenly they have no pace. Doesn't make any sense to me because I would have expected coming here they'd have, decent pace, at least maybe the type of pace you're seeing, say, from Williams. That'd be what you would have expected with Alpine. But that's not what they've shown so far. And then Joe Guanyu obviously splitting the two Alpines in 19th place. But those are all, although, that's the practice 3 results. Let me go through what I believe your pecking order is for qualifying. So, in qualifying trim, I would say McLaren, I think, have the fastest car. Not by miles. I think maybe only a tenth, maybe 2/10 are the absolute maximum. But I think McLaren have got the best car for qualifying today. Ferrari definitely second. Red Bull, I would have to say third. And then Mercedes fourth. Racing Bull's definitely fifth. And then Haas in sixth. And then after that, probably say Williams 7th, Sauber 8th, Aston Martin 9th, Alpine 10th, if you're looking at it, based on practice 3. And that's the only session where we've got representative data. So yeah, we'll see in qualifying if there's any changes to that pecking order. But for the top 4-5 teams, I would be surprised if there's massive changes to that pecking order. But based on that, let's get into my prediction for qualifying, which, like I said, I had to do based on the practice 3 results rather than what I normally do, which is based on FP2 or, the best Friday session. And in my view, just about Lando Norris will take pole position in Mexico, and it would be yet another pole position for him in 2024. Charles Leclerc second, half a tenth off Lando Norris. It will be close between McLaren and Ferrari, but like I said, I think McLaren have got the advantage in qualifying trim. Piastri, I think, will be third, a tenth of a second off. But I do want to say that I think any of that top three, Norris, Leclerc, Piastri, any of them could end up on pole. So even though I predicted Piastri to be third, doesn't mean pole position is not possible. It absolutely is. And I think between those top three and top four, yeah, 2, maybe 3/10 of a second at most will be separating them in qualifying today. Carlos Sainz, then I'm going in fourth. Max Verstappen, I'm going in fifth, with George Russell sixth. Yuki Tsunoda, I'm going in seventh, ahead of Lewis Hamilton in eighth, who I think will drop another not so great performance today. And then Liam Lawson, I'm going in ninth, with Nico Hulkenberg in 10th. So let me know, guys, in the live chat whether you agree or disagree. And obviously, there is a poll running in the live chat where I've asked you guys, who do you think will take pole position today in Mexico? The options in the poll are Max Verstappen, Charles Leclerc, Carlos Sainz, or Lando Norris. Let me know in that poll between now and the start of Q3, which would be in like an hour and 45 minutes from now. Yeah, let me know who you think will take pole position. As well, good to see so many people here. Let's try and get the likes up if we can. Let's try and get up to, say, 30 plus likes in the next few minutes. That'd be great if we could do that. Yeah, great to see you all here. Before, though, I come to your comments in the chat, and I can see there are plenty of them, which I will get on to. Let me just quickly go through a couple upgrades that have been brought by a couple teams this weekend. McLaren, new floor body for them. They did say they've got more upgrades in the pipeline. I think maybe they've got a bit more after this Grand Prix as well. Maybe this is having an effect this weekend. It's hard to tell because I think they were always going to be quick here in Mexico, where McLaren. So we'll have to see ultimately, through the race weekend, whether this new floor body has actually improved, the McLaren car. What we do know is the upgrades they brought a week ago definitely did not improve their car. From what I'm hearing, though, they are hoping that this upgrade will actually help more so than what we saw a week ago. And then the only other team to bring upgrades are Racing Bulls, who have got new floor fences and new floor edge. Maybe that is responsible slightly for why they are looking so quick this weekend. But ultimately, again, I think they would have been decently quick here anyway. But those are the only upgrades for the teams. And let me just come back to here, and I'll get the countdown back on screen in a moment. I'll just wait for the next minute to tick over, and then I'll get the timer back up. But yeah, make sure to get your comments in the chat. Let me know what you think is going to happen in this qualifying session coming up in just under 1 hour's time. And if there's any other F1 related questions you want to ask, then yeah, make sure to post them in the chat. There you go. 56 minutes to go until qualifying begins. As, yeah, I can see we're already up to 29 likes. Let's try, let's say the next half an hour, let's try and get up to 50 likes if we can. I think that's realistic. Yeah, if you haven't hit the like button yet, make sure to do so. It does help, of course, the channel grow in the algorithm, and it does show me that you guys do enjoy the content. By the way, thank you to Ronan, who has just donated €2.49. Thank you very much for that, mate. And he actually says, Ronan, earlier in the chat, hi, Chaz, a long time no see, but I hope you're doing well. I'll try to come more often. No problem. But, yeah, keep your comments and likes coming. KH, I think this is from earlier, says, I'm thinking Piastri could get pole. He definitely could. And the reason I didn't put him in my poll was because I made that poll last night. And I thought, realistically, he's, maybe not one of the top four options in my head last night anyway, as to who was going to be likely for pole. But one thing that is good to see is that he's back on form, because last week he wasn't at his best, and also McLaren were not really quick at all, which didn't help. And then in Singapore, he was miles off the pace of his teammate, and even though he finished third, again that was, I think, more so down to the performance of the car. Francisco, good to see you, mate. Says, good evening, Shazza. Hoping for a good qualifying for Ferrari, not necessarily pole, but I trust the race pace. Stadium section ruins the flow of the track for me. Yeah, I know the stadium section looks great on TV, and it's, you know, I'm sure it's great in person, especially when you have the podium celebrations and all of that. But it does ruin the circuit. The old um track here, where you had the middle sector, you then went into a very fast right-hander to finish the lap. Now, I know that final corner was a bit dangerous, especially with the bumps, but they easily could have, solved that and made it safer, to make it, um, to make the flow of the track still good. But no, they ruined it in the name of, a good looking part of the track, rather than something that made sense from say a racing point of view. Um, Let me scroll down here. As Will of Wands, I just saw earlier in the chat saying Alex Albon will never strike any fear, which I agree, but just funny to see that comment. Um, Francisco says Colapinto was doing really well in endurance against proper drivers before F1. His quality was not a surprise for me. Yeah, I've heard of the guy for a couple years now, and he's had decent results, but it wasn't until I properly started watching him in F2 a couple times where I got to see how good he really was, and yeah, I was impressed. I've also been impressed by, again, Bortoletto, who might be on the grid next year. But yeah, I had a decent feeling when he was announced to replace Logan Sargent. I did have a decent feeling about how he would do, but I didn't think he would be anywhere near as good um as he's been. Absolutely nowhere near as good. Willafon says David Clowncroft thought Zhou was going to Alpine. I mean, it wouldn't be a surprise. I know Alpine have got their driver lineup sorted now, but it wouldn't be surprised if Alpine had gone for that, because it's Alpine. They just do stuff that makes absolutely no sense. But Alpine have thankfully gone for a good lineup. They've got Gasly and Jack Doohan in the car for next year. Francisco says Bottas will go to Mercedes next year as a reserve driver plus GT commitments. Yeah, I could see that. I think he'd be happy being a reserve driver for 3 or 4 years. Keeps him in and around Formula One, and gets him back to in a team where obviously he did great, and has lots of friends. Um, let's just find some other comments here if I can. Nino says, is Alpine going to be like this next year? They should be forced to sell it if they don't want to spend money for improvement. I mean, theoretically, you would hope that they would be better next year. I mean, normally, you would be. If you're a midfield team and you have a poor year, normally those teams respond with a good year or a better year. We saw, if you look at AlphaTauri, for example, 2023 was, even though the end of the season was good for them, overall it was a poor season for AlphaTauri last year. When you look at this year, it's been a step up and it's been better. Same for Haas. Last year, Haas I think they finished last in the championship. This year, they're going to finish in the top 6. So normally in the midfield, what you'll get is, a bad year followed by a good year, then maybe another bad year, and then maybe another good year. The thing with Alpine is, and we already know that, they are shutting down their engine division and that they are going to be most likely, I don't think it's been confirmed at this point, but I think it's pretty much nailed on to happen that they are going to be Mercedes powered, the Alpine team in 2026. There's no incentive next year for Alpine to be good, because if they are good, when I say good, I mean, a bit better than this year, then it will just end up being what they did in 2023, which, was, considering the resources they've got, it was, not terrible, but not great. So, yeah, with Alpine, I don't really have any, I don't really have any hope regarding them next year. I really don't. Because again, there's no incentive for them to be good. There really isn't. And that is a shame for their two drivers. Jack Doohan, who's in Formula 2, been a very good driver, and I think, has a good chance of showing that he's, good enough to be in Formula 1 for a while. But for Pierre Gasly, who obviously left AlphaTauri at the end of 2022, obviously going to Alpine at the time was a clear step up. Now, if he was to leave Alpine and go back to where he was, it'd be a clear step up. So I do feel sorry for the drivers, because they are, there's nothing they can do, really, but just do the best they can with absolute garbage machinery. So yeah, Alpine, I don't really have any hope for them. And, we'll see what 2026 brings, but for next year, I wouldn't be surprised if they're just as bad. Would be quite incredible, though, if they were worse. But the thing is if they were worse, that might be because they just, they might deliberately end up tanking the season, which, of course, Haas did in 2021. And in the end, you'd have to say it did benefit them, because they were a lot stronger for it in this last 2 to 3 years. But with Alpine, whether that will be able to benefit them, who knows? Let me scroll down. JANZ says McLaren should get Lawson. I'm wondering if you're a New Zealander saying that. I like Lawson. I know there's rumours of that he might go to Red Bull, which I mean, if he's the only option to replace Sergio Perez, then I'm all for it, because Perez is not going to get any better. There's just no way of that happening. But still, for me, if Yuki Tsunoda is an option at Red Bull, then why not Yuki Tsunoda? But I'm not sure he is an option, because, I mean, if they were going to replace Perez with Tsunoda, surely they would have done it, you know, last year or a few months ago. Ronan says, or asks, did you see the high performance podcast with Otmar? Very good, and he gave lots of reasons why Alpine won't succeed. I haven't. I had no idea he went on that podcast. The reason, though, I won't be listening to that podcast. I'll probably try and see if there's any quotes coming out of it. In certain F1 news places, is because I cannot stand Jake Humphrey and his podcast. Cannot stand it. He is so cringeworthy. Which I don't know if this is the way Jake's always been, but he didn't feel like this, back when he was presenting Formula One on the BBC. But I mean, Efron on Twitter just bullies the hell out of him, and rightfully so, because some of the stuff he posts on Twitter as well is just absolutely so cringe-inducing that it would literally kill you. It is that bad. And he's a very LinkedIn type person, which is not a compliment, trust me. Some of the people on LinkedIn, that website, are absolute psychos, and again, cringe-worthy people. So yeah, there's no way I can listen to that podcast. I know he had Adrian Newey on there as well a few weeks ago when it was announced that Adrian was, signing with Aston Martin, but again, absolutely no way I can listen to it, because I just cannot stand Jake Humphrey and his high performance basics and all that rubbish. And he's part of that. He's part of that. There's this movement online of of people selling this, or this. I'm not sure if to call it an idea or dream, or selling this type of lifestyle to make people's lives better. Of, wake up at 5 a.m. and do 1,000 sit-ups or whatever, and that rubbish. I mean, Jake Humphrey doesn't quite do that. I think his is, what is it? I think his is wake up at 5 a.m. and write down 5 things you're grateful for, which again is just so fucking cringeworthy. It is um incredibly bad. So yeah, I just can't listen to that podcast, I'm afraid. But yeah, I'm not surprised with with Otmar coming out and saying, Alpine aren't good enough in certain areas, and this is why they would never win. I'm not surprised he's saying that. Not surprised at all. And Otmar, I think, got way too much blame for his time at Alpine. Yeah, the Piastri situation, he could have handled it better, but I don't think that was entirely his fault. The person above him, I can't remember his name, but I think he also really mismanaged that whole situation. But in terms of Alpine's competitiveness, I don't think you can blame him, because the problem is bigger at this point at that team than simply who the team principal is. It's not like Ferrari, where over the last few years with Ferrari, they've had clear potential but have just had certain personnel in wrong positions. like, Bonotto as the team boss, or, Inaki Rueda, obviously we used to bash a lot, who was the team strategist of Ferrari. We'd always say, oh, if they just replace these certain people, they'll be a lot better. And look where we're at now with them. A year and a half after those two have been replaced, Ferrari are possibly on their way to winning the Constructors' Championship. So with Ferrari, it was always a case of just a few moves here and there, and they can make that step to being championship competitive. But with Alpine, they have been nowhere near the level they should have been at for the last 5 years. So, you know, changing the team principal or a certain, you know, technical director or, sporting director it's not going to do anything, because the problem is bigger than just getting rid of someone and replacing them in a few specific roles. It's a bigger problem than that. And again, I think Otmar got way too much criticism for something that really wasn't his fault. And if you actually look at his time at Alpine, I mean, in 2022, he guided the team to fourth place in the championship, which at the time was a pretty good result. And that was probably Alpine's best season in Formula One in terms of, performance in the Constructors' Championship. I mean, they finished fourth in 2018, but 2022 was much more impressive in terms of competitiveness, and also the team they had to fend off to get that position in McLaren were more formidable, let's say, than Haas were in 2018. So, yeah. Again, Otmar gets a lot of unfair criticism. But, I mean, Alpine have had a few bad team principals. Cyril, a bit bull, obviously was one. And I personally, sorry there, I was just having a quick drink. Yeah, I personally was never a fan of Cyril, and I think he was a poor team principal. Again, with him, even though he wasn't good enough for that role, it was never as simple as just sacking him and then, Renault were going to suddenly start winning races and winning, championships and stuff like that. I think the problem at Renault was, I think it probably, it started during the Cyril Abitbol era, but I don't think it was his fault. I think the reason Renault have failed is because it goes all the way up to, the management, up, to the absolute highest people in the organization. But what I do know is how they started out their project when obviously Renault became a work team again in 2016. They had Fred Vasseur as their team boss, and then I think due to disagreements over certain things, they got rid of him. That was the beginning of where they went wrong. Now, again, I don't think Fred would have been good enough to completely overturn Renault's fortunes, but that was a big mistake, no doubt about it. And then, continuous poor hires for team principal didn't make things any better. But again, the problem at Renault, it is deeper than just who the team principal is. Um, Let's find some other comments here. Ronan says useless Bottas might be out of sports soon. Perez to Audi 2025, a big prediction for 2025. If Perez was still performing at a good enough level, then I wouldn't be surprised if Audi went for that. But Sergio Perez he's got probably 2 years left in Formula One at the absolute most, and I don't think Audi wants someone for such a short-term deal, really. And honestly, I think when Perez does leave Red Bull, whatever that is, I think Perez probably will retire because there's nothing more for him to accomplish. Ronan also saying Norris, Leclerc, Piastri, Max, Checo, top 5 today for him. Ronan says Chaza, Sonoda is really not that good. Maybe, but he is better than Sergio Perez. And that's really what it's about when it comes to Red Bull, is who is going to be the best option for that number 2 role. And if you're looking at Sonoda, Lawson, Ricciardo, and Perez as your options, Sonoda's the best option. Doesn't necessarily mean he'll be good enough when he gets to Red Bull, but based on the last year or so, he's the best. He's the best option. Kyle saying, why doesn't the poll question have my boy K-Mag as an option? Maybe next week in Brazil I'll have him as an option, because obviously he has been on poll before. Ronan says, I hate the website too, LinkedIn. Unfortunately, I know a few people who work there. I mean, LinkedIn, especially for the type of work I'm going to be going into after I finish university, I'm sadly going to have to use that website because it is useful. Because I'm going to be doing freelance media stuff. Maybe not beginning next summer. Maybe we'll have to see. But what do you call it? Yeah, it's something that sadly I'll have to use, but I won't enjoy doing it. Right, let's find any other comments if I can. So Regara saying Bottas 23rd place, top work. Yeah, I saw someone on, was it X, a few days ago saying how special it is that Sauber have got their drivers in 21st and 23rd place in a 20 driver championship. I think that sums up just how bad Sauber have been in 2024. John Smith, what do you think of Colapinto's performances? Absolutely fantastic, and he should be on the grid next year. It's a shame that, again, by the sounds of it, from what he's been saying, sounds like he won't be. By the way, I'm going to just quickly post the link of the stream out again. So keep your comments coming. I will keep reading them out. But I'm just going to quickly post the stream link back out. But we are on, 56 likes? Cheers for that, guys. Let's try and get up to 75 likes if we can in the next half an hour, right as we get into qualifying. So yeah, let's try and get up to 75 likes. So smash that like button if you haven't already. But yeah, let me just post this out again. Come join us here to Watchalong qualifying in Mexico. There you go. But Actually, another thing I'm going to do before I come back to your comments, and I will come back to them, is just going to whiz through all of the teams and give my thoughts as to how I think qualifying will go for all of the teams. So we'll start with Red Bull, and Red Bull not looking anywhere near as competitive as they usually have been in Mexico. Of course, they have dominated this Grand Prix in terms of race wins. They're going to do really, really well to win this race this weekend. Qualifying, obviously, coming up, they are not looking like pole position contenders. Maybe they can get third on the grid if maybe one of the other front-running drivers makes a mistake and Max, delivers his best lap. But I don't think a front row is possible in that Red Bull. I just don't see it. I don't think the car is good enough, and I don't think they have got pole position level pace. I think they're really relying on Max Verstappen being as good as he is just to be really competitive in the, say, top 4-5 on the grid. So yeah, their hopes again lie with Max Verstappen. Sergio Perez, I don't think, given his current pace, will make the top 10. If he can, great. He's, gone and done something he should be doing, but it's not a guarantee that Perez, in front of his home crowd, a home crowd that he might be racing in front of for the final time, there's no guarantee, like I said, that he will be getting into the top 10. So Red Bull not looking great whatsoever going into the session. But for the Scuderia Ferrari team, it is looking much better. They are 100% contenders for pole position. And some say favourites for pole position, because from certain bits of data yesterday, some people were claiming Ferrari have the best car for both quali and race trim. For race trim, I don't deny that Ferrari probably do have the fastest car. Qualifying wise, though, not sure that's the case, but they are definitely close enough on pace to fight for pole position. Remember, of course, they locked out the front row at this Grand Prix last year. If they do it again, then I think they're guaranteed to win tomorrow. So we will see how it ends up for Ferrari. But if it ends up how I predicted it to end up, second and fourth, I think they'll be happy with that, considering, of course, you've got a long run down to turn 1. And then Mercedes-Benz, not really much to say about them. They are the slowest of the top 4 teams. Maybe if Max doesn't have a great session, they can end up, say, P5, but any higher than that, and they are really in territory that they don't quite belong in, considering the pace of the car this weekend. These conditions, very hot and humid, just it's not the conditions where the Mercedes car thrives in, unfortunately. So yeah, 4th best team and probably around 6th, 7th on the grid is where you're going to see them. McLaren, though, who of course lead the Constructors' Championship by 40 points, and of course Lando Norris 57 points behind in the Drivers' Championship compared to Max Verstappen, they desperately need pole position for this Grand Prix. And Lando Norris definitely can get it, but there's going to be a lot of pressure on for him to deliver. He's going to have at least a couple rivals for pole, one of them being his teammate, Oscar Piastri. And then obviously Leclerc and the Ferrari you'd expect to be up there. Maybe even Carlos Sainz. Depends on how close really Sainz can be to his teammate as to whether Sainz is a pole position contender. But Lando, you got to give him credit. He has been very good as of late at delivering on a Saturday. Obviously Sunday is where it all goes wrong normally for Lando. But if he can just deliver yet again and, continue in that form, there's no reason why he won't end up on pole position. But in view to the race tomorrow, of course, long run down to turn 1 and 3rd place on the grid is a pretty good place to be. So it wouldn't actually be that great for McLaren necessarily if they locked out the front row. Probably be better for McLaren, and I think they personally will probably be aiming for this, if they could get first and third on the grid, which is what I predicted them to get, probably gives them a better chance of being in the lead with one of their cars on the exit of the first couple corners tomorrow in the race. So we'll see how that plays out with McLaren and who can be in a decent position to obviously gain at the start of the race. If you look at last year, Max Verstappen obviously won the Mexico City Grand Prix. Max started from third and overtook both Ferraris between the start line and the exit of turn one. And obviously the double slipstream helped massively in that case. So again, third place, very, very important who ends up there in qualifying today. I think it'll be Oscar Piastri. We'll see who ends up in that position. But in terms of who gets pole, I think McLaren are the most likely team to get it, and I think Lando Norris will keep up his fantastic pole position form. Aston Martin, not really in any shape to be in the top 10 or contenders even for the top 10. I would be surprised if they got both cars into Q2. And if they do that, then I guess well done. Outperforming expectations. But expectations are on the floor for this team. Racing Bulls looking good. Both cars in the top 10 in practice 3. And they look like, and maybe this isn't surprising after, of course, last year at this Grand Prix where they were so incredibly quick, that they are once again, by far, by the looks of it, the best looking midfield team. Yuki Tsunoda looking very good. Liam Lawson also in the top 10. And there's a very good chance that Racing Bulls could be mixing it, say, with Mercedes and maybe Red Bull if Max Verstappen is not quite at his best. So very interested to see where Racing Bulls end up. They could be the real surprise of qualifying, just like they were when they were AlphaTauri last year. So watch out for Racing Bulls and Yuki Tsunoda. Alpine look like they've got the slowest car. Again, surprisingly, maybe we'll see an upturn in pace once we get into qualifying, but I'd be surprised if we did. Williams, decent pace, but not enough, I don't think, to make the top 10, but watch out for them anyway, because they do have two drivers that do have a knack for surprising. Sauber, they look a bit better than they usually are, but still not good. And Haas probably have a good enough car to get one driver into the top 10. Again, Nico Hülkenberg is who I'm favouring there, but it is going to be mightily close for them to get into that top 10. And if you missed earlier, here is my prediction for qualifying. I think Lando Norris will take pole with Charles Leclerc second. Oscar Piastri, I think, will take the possibly all-important third place, with Carlos Sainz in fourth, Verstappen fifth, Russell sixth, Tsunoda seventh, Hamilton eighth, Lawson ninth, and Nico Hülkenberg, I think, will round out the top 10. But there you go, guys. Let me just get back on screen. The countdown, there you go. About 21 minutes to go until qualifying begins. So those are my thoughts for the teams. Give me your thoughts before we get into it. And yeah, we're on 63 likes. Let's try, like I said, let's try and get to 75 if we can by the time qualifying begins in 20 minutes. Michael Gott says Lawson to Red Bull could Colapinto, I think I was going to say. Colapinto go to Baby Bull. Is he in that driver program? He's not, but there has been, I think, discussions, but Red Bull don't seem keen enough to have him in their car. So, yeah, Colapinto doesn't look like he's going there. Maybe Lawson is going to Red Bull, but I still don't think it's super likely. I can still see them keeping Sergio Perez because the time to get rid of Perez was in the summer break and they didn't do it. So, I mean, what's the point of getting rid of him for next season, really? Because they've proven that, there's nothing Perez can do really to get himself sacked. And John Smith asking with Colapinto, should he get a seat next year? Absolutely, but doesn't look like he's going to, unfortunately. $2 Timu Undies. Well, that's a very interesting username. Perez is a joke. How will Red Bull lose in the Constructors' Championship? Danny Rick could not do worse than Sergio Perez. Perez drives like he's on the McLaren payroll. You have to say, with Verstappen, he's 57 points clear of Norris. And normally, with any driver, if they were 57 points clear in the Drivers' Championship, you would expect the team they're racing for to be leading the Constructors' Championship by maybe around the same, 50, 60 points. But no, Red Bull 40 points behind. That's just how bad Perez has been. He is that much of a negative for them. But somehow, Red Bull still have a chance in the Constructors' Championship. I still don't think they will. I still don't think Red Bull are going to win it. I think McLaren will end up taking it. I trust McLaren to get it done on the Constructors' side because they're too strong with their drivers in terms of the amount of points they score. To not win the championship. Lil Pill says, as an Aussie, I'm horrified the poll doesn't contain Oscar. I know. But, yeah, we'll see whether he gets pole here in qualifying, which, again, he very well could. Tastic says Perez will suddenly wake up and pole today. You watch, guys. I know it's drivers usually do better when they're performing in front of the home crowd. I mean, yeah, but I think Perez is performing that badly that even that can't help him. I mean, it kind of reminds me, maybe not as bad as this, but when Jolyon Palmer was on the grid, even when he was racing at Silverstone, he, the home crowd still couldn't help him to a properly good result. I remember, I think 2017 British Grand Prix, he did qualify 10th. But really, that was because of the car, because the car was really quick that weekend. I don't think it was because Palmer was having a good weekend. But he did then break down on the formation lap, which summed up his Formula One career. Hello to Yanni. Good to see you. Rona says, I think that proves how good Verstappen is, actually. Maybe. I mean, at the end of the day, it's impossible to know just how much better Verstappen is than Perez. Obviously, he's much better, but in terms of pure lap time, we're never going to know. Only Red Bull know that. But, I mean, yeah, Max obviously is going to win the championship, and him winning the championship is, for me, absolute confirmation that he is not only the best driver in the world, but he is by far the best driver in the world, because he has not had the best car on the grid this season. He has not. Red Bull have had the best car, I mean, for the first, 6 races. And then after Miami, maybe they had the best car for maybe 3 races, you could say at most. But I would say for this season, I'd say McLaren, in terms of pure pace, have had the best car in 2024. And I think when we get to the end of the season, that will be. I think most people will agree with that McLaren have been the quickest team of all in 2024. And, for Verstappen to win the championship by that margin, if it does finish around that, again, it shows that he is by far the best driver and is without a doubt. I mean, I can just say it now, even though I'm going to do my end of season driver rankings, at the end of the year, Max Verstappen, without doubt, is the best driver of this season. No doubt about it. Ronan says, I genuinely don't see the point of replacing Perez. Not sure anyone would do better in the second seat. Well, let's find out. That's the thing. Let's, throw Tsunoda or maybe even Lawson in there. And again, let's find out. Because we know what Perez has to offer. As I've just seen, Real Madrid 4-0 down at home to Barcelona. Absolutely incredible, but not exactly a surprise because Barcelona this season have been much better than Real Madrid. Obviously, Barcelona just got off hammering Bayern Munich. But, yeah, sorry, that distracted me because that is just quite incredible. But, yeah, let's see. Tsunoda cannot be that bad that he would be any worse, surely, than Perez. So I don't see what there is really to lose. Big G says Perez keeping that seat is indicative of a fat paycheck from Carlos Slim, plus finishing lower for Red Bull means more win total time next year. True, I mean, it does mean more win tunnel time next year, but I think Red Bull would prefer to win the Constructors' Championship because, you never know when the chance to win a Constructors, this might be their final Constructors' Championship opportunity for a while. You have no idea. So I think, they'd prefer to win the Constructors. And yeah, I mean, with why Perez is still in the Red Bull, I think absolutely it is due to money. I think Red Bull, they are clearly getting a lot of money from Carlos Slim. And that's why he's still in the car. Because clearly he's opened his wallet up a bit more than he's had to previously. Let's see if there's any other comments here that I've not read out. Ronan's saying we'll have to agree to disagree on this issue. Chazar on Perez. Yeah. Was it Looney Classic saying Mbappe's a bit disappointing this year? Yeah, you could say that with him, but I think the issue, and this is why Real Madrid, one, is just an insane club for just, the signings they make, but this is why Real Madrid are not going to win the what do you call it? They're not going to win the Champions League, I don't think, this season. And I think actually them signing Mbappe, I wouldn't say makes them weaker, but with the other players they've already got, it was not a great signing because they've already got players in the position that he was playing in for, you know, for Paris Saint Germain. And at Real Madrid, you've got like three left wingers. You know, that forward line of Real Madrid, they're all basically left wingers. So yeah, that front line just doesn't work. And I mean, it was inevitable after last season that they were going to have a drop off, because I think, what was it, last season they won the league and the Champions League. There's no way they were going to equal that again. I don't think. Pretty hard to in this era of football. But drivers getting ready, I can see, getting their overalls on and getting ready to hit the track, as we have got 9 minutes remaining until qualifying begins in Mexico City. I can see that Sky F1 stupidly have kept Danica Patrick on their coverage after last weekend, where she was abysmal. And she's abysmal all the time, but from what I've heard, she's even been worse this week. And yeah, I just don't get it. I don't get why she's a pundit. She wasn't even that good in IndyCar. The only reason she gets any attention is, one, obviously, at the time she got onto the IndyCar field, obviously her being a female, set a precedent, let's say. But also her antics, let's say, was another reason why anyone heard or cared about her. But if you look at the pure results side, she was a mid IndyCar driver at best. So I don't understand why they've got her on the Formula One coverage. I really don't. Surely they could find better people than her. I tell you, one person that Sky F1 got rid of that I don't, unless this person just didn't want to do it anymore, I don't really understand why they didn't have them on the coverage anymore. But Bruno Senna, I thought Bruno Senna was a good pundit. He wasn't great. He wasn't as good as, say, Brundle or Jenson Button or Anthony Davidson, but I thought he was good. He was better than Paul di Resta was. Look how long Paul di Resta fucking lasted for. Felt like we were going to have him for an eternity. I thought he was better than Johnny Herbert, who all he did was, he was just basically the comic relief and didn't really add too much. And I even prefer him to Damon Hill, who I really don't like Damon Hill as a pundit. So yeah, I don't get why he was not around for that long, because I thought he was good, and he offered decent insight as well. But yeah, that's unfortunately the way it is. Looney Classics, but I thought Red Bull had a lot of money. Why did he need money from Carlos Slim? Maybe the Thai family wants to balance the books and not just spend, spend, spend. Well, it depends. If Carlos Slim isn't he one of the richest men on earth? He might be giving them like unbelievable amounts of money, like money that you can't possibly turn down. You don't know, because obviously it benefits him a lot that Perez is on the grid with the sponsors and all of that. So yeah, he could be paying Red Bull just an unbelievable amount of money, and that Red Bull at that point just have to say, you know what, let's keep him. Ricky L says she's just a DEI hire, or was she an IndyCar or NASCAR? She was in both, I think, but again, she wasn't. It's not like she was IndyCar champion or NASCAR champion. She was like a mid-level um from what I remember. I, I thought she was just a mid-level driver at that level, but according to Sky Sports, clearly not. She's a absolutely amazing driver. Um, I mean, her being a female and the whole diversity thing, it definitely does play into it as to why she's on Sky F1, which is funny because I think the type of politics she has is, she actually, I think, argues against that with the politics she has, which again is funny, but she shouldn't be on Sky F1. She's shit. She's not a good pundit. By the way, if you want to see a great piece of content on Danica Patrick, go and watch a video by my favorite YouTuber, especially for sports, Urinating Tree. He did a video about 6 or 7 years ago about Danica Patrick, and it's called, I think, Professional Racing's Blue Screen of Death. And that it absolutely sums up her racing career. So make sure to go and watch that video after this stream, because yeah, it perfectly sums up Danica Patrick. Anyway, enough of her. Let's get into qualifying in Mexico. Couple final things though before we get into it. The championship standings: Max Verstappen 57 points clear of Lando Norris. Norris desperately has to be really at least on the front row here in qualifying. Leclerc third. Obviously Leclerc still technically has a chance at the championship, but realistically surely cannot come back from, I think, 79 points behind he is with 5 races to go. Oscar Piastri in 4th, Carlos Sainz is in 5th, Lewis Hamilton 6th, only 10 points clear of teammate Russell, Perez in 8th, Fernando Alonso in P9, and Nico Hülkenberg in P10. And then on the constructors' side, McLaren 40 points clear of Red Bull, and Ferrari 49 or 48 points clear, points behind, the McLaren team. So a 3-way fight we have in the Constructors' Championship. And of course, qualifying today crucial as to that result. Mercedes in 4th, Aston Martin 5th, Haas in 6th, Racing Bulls in 7th, Williams 8th, Alpine 9th, and Sauber still pointless in 10th. But let's go on to a few of the top teams and some stats regarding those teams before this session. Max Verstappen for Red Bull, his last pole position in Mexico was in 2022. Red Bull have taken pole in Mexico only twice since 2015. Not a great record considering how successful they've been on the Sunday. Those 2 poles, by the way, were 2022 and 2018. 2018, obviously, they locked out the front row with Ricciardo on pole. Their last pole position, though, in Formula 1, 9 races ago in Austria. Should have had pole probably a week ago, but the last official pole was 9 races ago at the very end of June. For Ferrari, they took pole position and actually locked out the front row at last year's Mexico City Grand Prix, and Ferrari have started on pole in Mexico 3 times since 2015. Leclerc also got pole here in 2019, so he's looking for his 3rd pole position in Mexico. Vettel took pole here for Ferrari in 2017. And Ferrari's last pole position in Formula 1, 3 races ago in Baku. Watch out for Leclerc. He is very much in form at the moment. For Mercedes, their last pole position in Mexico was in 2021 with Valtteri Bottas. They've taken 3 poles in Mexico since 2015. Their last pole position, though, was 8 races ago at Silverstone, where, of course, they locked out the front row. And for McLaren, their last pole position was in Mexico was in 1990 with Gerhard Berger, a race weekend that they should have won and somehow did not. They have taken, though, 5 of the last 7 pole positions on offer, with Lando Norris taking 4 of the last 5 pole positions. Can he do it yet again Let's find out, as Q1, guys, has just begun. And I will sync up the timer at the 17-minute mark once we get to it. And of course, Efron, who is in the drop zone, as you can see on the left-hand side of your screen, below that dotted line, if they are in that drop zone at the end of Q1, then they will be eliminated in Q1. As cars coming out onto track, Alpines, Aston Martins, those two teams probably will have cars eliminated in this part of qualifying. As we're looking at Ferrari, who are about to release, I think, Sainz, maybe? Or no, Leclerc. As there you go. 17 minutes remaining on the clock. As... Right, just, there you go. My stream page crashed, but thankfully I am still streaming. So, yeah, that's all good. And by the way, hello to Rooksfoot. Good to see you in the chat, who has actually posted that video in the chat. So, yeah, make sure to go and watch it. It's an absolutely brilliant video. And, yeah, we're on 70 likes, by the way. Let's try and get up to 80 likes if we can in the next few minutes. That'd be great if we could. But let's get these first runs in qualifying underway. And pole position for today should be a late 1:15. Exactly what the lap time is, though, is going to be hard to predict, given how close it'll be. But I think the best time possible for today in qualifying, I think you're looking at probably a 1:15.7. Given that we, Piastri did a 1:16.4 in Q1, not Q1, practice 3. So, yeah, I'd say 1:15.7 is the absolute best time I think you can do in qualifying today. And that is what I think is the, say, target time for pole position later. So, keep your eyes peeled on the lap times. And in this session, if anyone's doing a mid 1:16 or better, then that is a very good lap time and should be good enough, definitely, to get through to the second part of qualifying if they're doing a mid 16 or better. As Sergio Perez, the home driver, and again, this might be his last Mexican Grand Prix, begins his first qualifying lap. And today he must at least get into the top 10. Obviously, this time last year at this Grand Prix, he had a brilliant and blistering start to the race and got up to almost the lead and went for glory. Saw his name in the headlines and squeezed Leclerc at turn 1 and ended up taking himself out of the race. As Perez on this lap so far has been looking good. No clear issues as he comes through the S's section. Perez 58.0 for the middle sector as Lando Norris has done a purple first sector for McLaren. As we've got Ferrari 1-2 at the moment. Don't know what the lap times are, but it is Sainz quickest from Leclerc second. Here comes Perez, who only goes into 7th place on a 1:18.5. Carlos Sainz, by the way, quickest on a 1:17.4. Leclerc second on a 17.8, and both drivers have set that time on the medium compound tyre. Lando Norris, going quicker than Sainz, is also on the medium compound tyres. So, looking to save tyres are the top teams. I don't think the medium in qualifying today will be quicker than the soft, as Lando Norris goes quickest by 1/4 of a second. So Norris quickest from Sainz, Leclerc, Alonso 4th, and then Stroll in 5th. Not anymore, because George Russell is up to 4th, also on medium compound tyres. Lewis Hamilton now 3rd on the mediums. So Alonso 6th, Stroll 7th, Bottas 8th, and then you've got Gasly 9th, Perez 10th, and then Ocon in 11th and Zhou in 12th. Only 12 times on the board so far. Here's another one, Piastri, only 8th on the soft compound tyre. But I'm not sure actually if it was the soft, because I know it wasn't, it was the medium. Because the timing is saying that McLaren have done it on the soft, but clearly we can see the onboard that they've done those times on the medium, as here's a replay. Piastri understeering wide at turn 4, I think that is. The first corner of the middle sector, as Max Verstappen on the soft compound tyre does a purple first sector, as Franco Colapinto goes 3rd on the soft compound tyre. And now Alex Albon goes up to 3rd, so a decent start there for Williams. As Verstappen, purple middle sector. And let's see how good this lap time is. Is it a mid 116? Not quite. It's a 116.9. So Max Verstappen quickest, but only by 0.2 of a second over Lando Norris, who did his lap on the mediums, which is half a second a lap slower than the soft. So that is a clear indication so far that McLaren are quicker than Red Bull. And probably say Ferrari as well, just about. As Fernando Alonso already on an outlap on fresh tyres. Going to be burning a lot of tyres, or Aston Martin, to try and get both cars into Q2. And the 2 Ferraris on an outlap as well, I assume, on soft compound tyres. But, yeah, let's see what Fernando Alonso can do. Alonso's never really had any great results here. Not his fault. He's never really had a good car for this Grand Prix. As Alonso has completed Sector 1. Kevin Magnussen's completed Sector 1 as he's doing his first qualifying lap. Magnussen's done a pretty good first sector, as Lance Stroll in the other Aston Martin has improved up to 4th place. The lap time, though, is still not great from Stroll, and definitely not comfortable enough for Aston Martin to see themselves through. As here comes Fernando Alonso through the final corner, and he goes 3rd, 0.3 off Verstappen. It's a good lap, but again, it's not comfortable enough to see Aston Martin through. They're going to have to do another run. As Kevin Magnussen goes 7th. Obviously benefiting from the more so rubbered in track. Leclerc only 7th. Well, that was actually on the medium, so Ferrari's still out there on mediums. So impressive. As Sainz improves back up to 3rd, only 1/4 of a second slower than Max on medium. So Ferrari's pace looking good. Yuki Tsunoda does a purple final sector, and Tsunoda goes third, only confirming their great speed. Hulkenberg up to second, showing that he does have the pace to be quick today. 1:17.1 for Hulkenberg, which he will have to do another run to make sure, but I think that lap time already is probably good enough for him to get through, as Liam Lawson has gone up to 7th place, as Zhou Guanyu improves up to 16th, and the drop zone currently, as Pierre Gasly goes all the way up to 2nd. Brilliant from Gasly, a 1:17.1. Finally, Alpine showing some performance. As Valtteri Bottas, I've just seen, is up to 11th place. So in the drop zone, with 6.5 minutes nearly to go, it is Russell, Ocon, Zhou, Piastri, and Perez. Piastri's on an outlap. Perez is in the pits. So you'd imagine Perez has only got one final run to go. Imagine if Perez qualified last. I think the crowd probably wouldn't turn up tomorrow. As Russell, 16th, but on a lap. Of course, Mercedes did their first runs on the mediums. They're now on the soft compound tyres. As George Russell does a purple middle sector. A very, very good one as well. And here comes Russell through the final corner, who qualified on the front row here a couple years ago. Ends up in 4th place, which only confirms Mercedes, not great with their speed. As Lewis Hamilton goes up to 8th on a 1:17.3, and that is not that good. And Hamilton is going to have to do another run, I think, because that is... he's going to be under pressure with that time. And probably Russell will have to do another lap as well. As Oscar Piastri now in 19th position. And Piastri now on another lap. And I'm expecting Piastri here to go quickest. And he is 0.7 of a second up on Verstappen after the first 2 sectors. As he's run wide and he's straddled the exit curb of turn 12. He would have lost quite a bit of time, but he could still go quickest with this lap. Lando Norris has now done a purple middle sector, and no, Piastri, such a bad mistake that he only goes 13th. And that, there's only 4.5 minutes to go. That might compromise the rest of his session, as Lando Norris goes quickest on a 1:16.5. And that is definitely good enough to see Lando into Q2. So he can come back to the pits and prepare himself for Q2. As they're using that really thickly onboard camera again on Lando's car, which I really don't like. It legitimately makes me feel sick. I hope they don't put that onboard or those onboards onto all the cars in the future, because watching onboards will be unbearable. As Colapinto has just gone up to P12, and Piastri's had his time deleted. So that will see him relegated back down to 19th place. And such a shame he made that mistake, because he would have gone at least 2nd with that lap. But he's going to have to warm his tyres up again and go for another lap as, he's back down to 19th. So with 3 minutes to go, the drop zone is Magnussen, Ocon, Zhou, Piastri, and Perez. Perez now on an outlap as he prepares for his final Q1 run. Here comes Oscar Piastri, though. All he's got to do is not make a mistake, and he will get through to Q2. The car is easily quick enough. As Piastri brakes hard into turn 1. And through the first 3 corners, he gets through it all good. Sergio Perez is just slightly behind him. And Piastri does not improve his first sector, but that's okay. The first sector, it matters, but not massively. It's really the middle and final sector that make your lap here. As into the middle sector he comes. This is where the McLaren should be at its absolute best. It's such a beast, this car, in the high-speed corners. And Piastri, yeah, he is definitely on a good lap. And so is Sergio Perez, as Max Verstappen has improved his lap time. But not by a ton. Here comes, though, Oscar Piastri, who only goes 14th. That is definitely not going to be good enough. He is going to get eliminated with that. Sergio Perez also, he's only got up to 15th. As Leclerc goes 3rd and Sergio Perez is out in Q1. A shocking effort as Tsunoda goes up to 5th. As Alex Albon is up to 7th. Let me just update that. As Magnussen out of the drop zone and up to 4th. Oscar Piastri is out as well. Complete disaster at McLaren. That really could hurt them in the Constructors' Championship. As Lawson does a lap time but stays in 13th. As now Ocon on a lap. Carlos Sainz goes up to 2nd. Ferrari have got both cars in. And yeah, Ocon, there's still obviously another 30 seconds to go. Piastri and Perez, though, backed off. They are done. As Bottas goes up to 14th. I tell you, Piastri and Perez, they're going to end up quite low down on the grid. As Franco Colapinto is in the pits and in 16th. So Colapinto is now out. So it's up to Ocon and Zhou to relegate Piastri and Perez even further down the grid. As the checkered flag now falls, these are your final laps. And there could still yet be some surprises. Mercedes are not that far ahead of the drop zone. As Ocon, through the final corner, stays 19th. And Zhou Guanyu, I don't know where he is, and I don't know if he's improving, but I presume he is going to finish up in last place where he belongs. As Perez says on the radio, fuck, or shit. Don't know which one it would have been, but 1:17.6, nowhere near good enough. That lap time is, I mean, it's quicker than what he did in practice 3, but what he did in practice 3 was absolutely horrific. As McLaren telling Piastri, we've been knocked out, and such a shame, because Oscar could have been a pole position contender, but he's going to be starting tomorrow from 17th on the grid. But Q1, guys, is over and done with. Let's go through the drivers on their way to Q2. Lando Norris, Carlos Sainz, Max Verstappen, Charles Leclerc, Kevin Magnussen, Pierre Gasly. Great job by him considering Ocon was in 19th. Yuki Tsunoda, Hulkenberg, Alex Albon, George Russell, Lewis Hamilton, Fernando Alonso, Liam Lawson, Valtteri Bottas, and Lance Stroll. Great job by Bottas as well. And knocked out in Q1, Franco Colapinto, Oscar Piastri in the McLaren, Sergio Perez in his home race in the Red Bull, Esteban Ocon, and Zhou Guanyu. what a surprising start. Even though I thought Perez would not get through to Q3 today, even I didn't think he'd be knocked out in Q1, but him and Piastri out, that now presents a big opportunity to a Haas, a Racing Bulls, maybe even a Williams with Albon to get a much higher result than they would have got normally. And it's not over, obviously. Q2 is to come, and this team on screen, Mercedes-Benz, ended up 10th and 11th, and I'm not so sure they're going to definitely get both cars into the top 10. So we might get even more surprises. When you get out qualified by Lance Stroll, says teammate. Yeah, it's not a great feeling because you know you're going to be pretty low down on the grid. There's proof Piastri can never be a champion. I disagree. I think he's, I think he's good enough. But, I mean, we saw this last year with Lando Norris. And I know people might say he's never going to be a champion. But, Lando is a very, very fast driver. But we saw this time last year, Lando Norris got knocked out in Q1. And then it was really a shame because I remember McLaren had really strong race pace. And Lando could have possibly won the race last year here in Mexico if it wasn't for him getting eliminated in Q1. But, yeah. As we're Sky F1 are analysing why Sergio Perez is so bad. And by the looks of it, no obvious areas to examine because he was hitting his apexes in the final sector. But ultimately, not quick enough. But Q2 should be possibly as dramatic as Q1 because, like I said, I could see a couple surprises happening in this second part of qualifying. Definitely with Mercedes, who I am not very confident with, I have to say. I mean, it wasn't the cleanest session for Piastri. Obviously, he made a couple mistakes. But ultimately, the reason he was eliminated was because obviously he made the mistake on the penultimate lap he did where he was going really quick. But he then had to stay out and do another quick lap on older tyres that were clearly past their best. And he didn't get enough time out of the tyres. So, I mean, at the end of the day, you've got to blame Oscar Piastri for his elimination. Just not good enough, I'm afraid. Especially, again, when this weekend he had a legit chance at pole and maybe even the race win. But we'll see what he does tomorrow. He'll probably come through to finish in, 7th or 8th place tomorrow. McLaren should have pretty good race pace, you'd think. But we now wait for Q2. Obviously, 15-minute long session. Let me just get the graphics ready. There you go. And obviously, anyone in between the two dotted lines at the end of Q2 will be out in those positions. And as it stands, from Q1, Lewis Hamilton, Fernando Alonso, Liam Lawson, Valtteri Bottas, and Lance Stroll would be quite a headline elimination there. But, yeah, McLaren, you got to say, despite losing Piastri, looking very good with Lando Norris, who in the track dominance they just showed on the screen, Ferrari quickest in the first sector where all the straights are, and then in all the corners, McLaren superior, which is no surprise. So, yeah, McLaren, at the minute, are looking like the clear favourites for me for pole. But you never know what could happen. Maybe Lando will make a mistake and end up getting eliminated himself. You never know. As Q2 has begun with 30 seconds in, I'll sync up the timer in about 25 seconds for you guys. As Max Verstappen in the sole Red Bull trundles out of the pit lane. And that is good news, though, for Verstappen that Piastri is out, because that's one less car to worry about. And also, with Piastri out, that means Max will gain a position on what he probably would have done if Piastri had been in Q3. So Max was looking at maybe, fourth, fifth on the grid. Maybe now he's a contender for the top 3, which would be, especially for the start of the race tomorrow, a pretty good position to start from. So I think Max is pleased with how things are going so far for his championship. But also, only one Williams remaining in this session. And I like the yellow they've put on the Williams. Makes it look a bit more retro. A bit more Rothman's Williams. As Alexander Albon, who's been in some poor form as of late, needs to step it up here now that Colapinto was eliminated in Q1. Needs to show the young man the way. And if he can get into Q3, I think that would be a good way to come back at his critics as of late. As Albon through the first sector, now into the middle part of the lap. And the Williams looking stable enough. Obviously, this part of the track around turn 9 is where Albon clattered into Oliver Behrman, who was doing a practice run for Ferrari, and it was clearly Albon's fault. Behrman got out of the way, and then Albon lost it and ended up hitting Behrman's car. Very embarrassing for Albono. But again, getting into Q3 here would, it'd be a good way to respond to the critics and set him up for maybe a points finish tomorrow. As he comes to the line and there's a 1:17.0, which is not going to be good enough to get into Q3, that's for sure. I think a 1:16.0 will definitely be good enough to get through to Q3. As Max Verstappen has a 1:16.6, which is a decent start, but again, he'll need to improve that. As Leclerc is into the final part of the lap, where the Ferrari is good, but not the best. As he exits the final corner, and Leclerc, clearly on very scrubbed tyres, goes third on a 1:17.6. We do see this with Ferrari at the start of Q2. They do their first laps in Q2 on old tyres, as Sainz goes second on a 17.0. Only 0.4 of a second slower than Verstappen. And if that is a scrubbed set of tyres for him, then shows the pace advantage they have over Red Bull to only be that far off on older tyres. As the replay of Max having a slight bit of oversteer through the S's. Just used a bit too much of the curb at turn 8, I think it was. Got too aggressive for what the car could handle. As he says on the radio, the rear tyres were a bit tricky in Sector 2. GP asks, what does that mean, Max? And he says, low grip. And also Leclerc having a big oversteer moment, but I don't think that's why he was so slow. Again, Ferrari, pretty sure they got out there on older tyres. As Kevin Magnussen we're now looking at, who, interestingly, with Magnussen, I don't know if you guys have picked this up, but since Magnussen has been announced that, you know, he's not going to be at Haas next year, and I mean, it's not officially confirmed, but Magnussen is very likely not to be on the grid next year. His performances all of a sudden have picked up, and he's been a bit more consistent. I mean, he didn't finish in the points last weekend, but he did have a good weekend overall. Was 7th in the sprint and 8th in qualifying, I think it was, or 9th in qualifying. And the only reason he finished outside of the points was because Haas, mistakenly, I think, in hindsight, pitted him for a second time when they didn't have to. As Magnussen ends up 4th with that lap time. Yeah, if you look back, Magnussen, they should have kept him out. And if they did, Haas would have ended up finishing in 8th and 9th. Because Hulkenberg ended up staying out on a one-stopper and he ended up finishing 8th. As Hulkenberg goes 5th, Valtteri Bottas goes 6th. Obviously, Bottas is not going to make it through to Q2. Tsunoda up to 4th. Alex Albon, though, still in 3rd. Impressive lap. It's turning into. Pierre Gasly up to 3rd. Gasly, just like last week, on fire. As Leclerc has had his time deleted. As Lando Norris has done a purple first sector. Stroll up to 7th, I'm just seeing. As we've got 9 times on the board. And Lando Norris for the middle sector. Quarter of a second up on Verstappen. So this is going to be a P1 lap. Lando's going to do probably a 16.3, maybe at best. As Alonso goes up to 6th and is replaced by Liam Lawson, who goes 6th. As Lando Norris does a 1:16.301 as George Russell goes 3rd, but 6.5 tenths slower than Lando Norris, clearly showing how far Mercedes are off the pace. They are nowhere near fighting for pole today. Russell 3rd, Hamilton 4th. And also remember, Ferrari have not done a lap on fresh tyres yet. So once they do that, Mercedes will be relegated probably down to 5th and 6th. So yeah, Mercedes not in the fight whatsoever here. As I think that's why Leclerc's had his time deleted, because he went curb hopping a bit too much at turn 2, which is, it's something everyone does, but you have to be very precise with how you do it, because sometimes you can go a bit too far off, and Leclerc did. But Ferrari so far in this session have certainly been keeping their powder dry. They've not really shown anything so far. They've got good pace, there's no doubt about it. But they're really trying not to use much of it so far. But 5.5 minutes to go in Q2, guys. And currently, on their way to Q3 is Lando Norris, Max Verstappen, the 2 Mercedes of Russell and Hamilton, Carlos Sainz, Pierre Gasly. What a performance that would be if he got into Q3. considering, again, Ocon, his teammate, 19th on the grid. Albon, 7th. Very good performance so far by him. Tsunoda, 8th, and Lawson, 9th. I don't know why, but I'm expecting more from them. But, I mean, if they do get both cars into Q3, that would be very good. And then Fernando Alonso just about is inside the top 10, which is at the minute, fantastic performance by him. Because that car has no right, in my view, to be in the top 10. As here is Alex Albon on what is probably it will be his final run in Q2. And if he can improve by, I don't know, 3-4 tenths of a second, then I think that'll be enough to get him into Q3. He's not improved his first sector, though. But to be fair, I didn't see any issues with the first sector, so let's see how this middle sector goes. And looks all right. And up to the middle sector point. Let's see what the time is. It's personal best. He's only half a second off Norris. He's going to improve maybe, but it's not going to be by a lot. Maybe a tenth of a second. Which I'm not sure, ultimately, if that will be enough. It will be close as Alex Albon comes to the line. And yeah, he improves by a tenth of a second. And he does go up to 5th. But I think a lot of cars behind are going to go quicker than that. Sainz and Leclerc, obviously. And then the 2 Racing Bulls, potentially. Maybe even the 2 Haas's. So it's going to be close for Albon to make it in. But we will find out in these final 3 minutes whether Alex Albon will be a top 10 starter as Leclerc has started his final run of Q2 and does a purple first sector. No surprise there. Ferrari always going to be the quickest in the first sector. As Leclerc through turn 5 and 6. Looking good. Now into the middle sector. This is where McLaren have the advantage over Ferrari. And Leclerc doing all right enough. Let's see what the middle sector is. Couple tenths off Norris. Not bad. As Verstappen improves by a couple tenths. Or no, a tenth. Stays in second. So Max is all good and through. As Leclerc through the final corner. And this should put him up to 3rd at least. And he does. He goes 3rd. 3.5 tenths slower than Lando Norris. And Carlos Sainz replaces Leclerc and goes 3rd. And as I said coming into qualifying, I don't think Ferrari have got as quick of a qualifying car as McLaren do, and I think we're seeing the evidence of that. What's interesting, though, is Max Verstappen in 2nd. If he can somehow in Q3 split Lando and the 2 Ferraris like he is now, that would be an incredible performance. Because I'm telling you, there is no way that Red Bull is as quick as the Ferrari. As both Haas's have done a good first sector on their final laps. Surely Haas can get 1 car into Q3. Remember, of course, still a big fight going on with Racing Bulls in the championship. They can't allow Racing Bulls to have a good weekend. As all traffic ahead for Magnussen. He's 3 tenths up on Lawson. And as long as the traffic didn't hold him up too much, he should be okay to go into the top 10. But whether he'll stay there, it's too close to call. As he comes to the line, and he goes 8th, and he did not improve the final sector, and I think that was because of the traffic. 17-0, he did yellow flag in sector 3, as Hulkenberg goes up to 8th, and now a red flag, and it's because of a crash. And it's Yuki Tsunoda, who was looking so good all weekend up until that moment. And he's binned it at turn 12. And because of that, that's the session over. And that means that both Racing Bulls are out in Q2. And Haas have got away with one, because I'm not sure they would have got both cars through. Or maybe even any of their cars through. But there you go. That is Q2, as race control confirmed it will not be resumed. And let's go through. Now Q2 is finished. Let's go through the drivers that are on their way to the shootout here in Mexico. Lando Norris, Max Verstappen, Carlos Sainz, Charles Leclerc, George Russell, Lewis Hamilton, Alexander Albon. What a performance by him. Nico Hulkenberg, Kevin Magnussen, and Pierre Gasly getting into the top 10. Bit lucky to get in. I don't think he would have made it if the red flag had not come out, but still, what a performance. And then eliminated guys in Q2, Yuki Tsunoda, Liam Lawson, Fernando Alonso, Lance Stroll, and Valtteri Bottas. As we've just seen a replay of what Tsunoda did, and going into turn 12, he locked his outside front, carried way too much speed into the corner, and then tried to correct it, ended up spinning and going into the barrier. They shouldn't have to repair the barrier really too much. I think really all they got to do there is just get the car out of the way. But yeah, Q2 is over and done with. And Q3 will be underway in the next, hopefully, 5 minutes or so. But of course, they're just trying to get Tsunoda's car taken away. And yeah, they're bringing a pickup truck to just get rid of Tsunoda's car, and I think they're gonna check the barrier is all good. My poll running in the chat is going to keep running probably for another few minutes, and then when Q3 gets underway, I will finish up the results of that poll and see who you guys have voted for as the driver most likely in that poll to take pole position. And your options are, remember, Max Verstappen, Charles Leclerc, Lando Norris, and Carlos Sainz. So keep your votes coming. You can still, the poll can still be swayed. It's still close enough. But personally, going into Q3, I think Lando Norris is taking pole. Unless he comes across an unlucky red flag or he makes a mistake. If he keeps it together and there's no red flags at the wrong time, I think Lando Norris takes pole. But again, just because you get pole does not mean here in Mexico that you are going to win. Many people have taken pole here in Mexico and failed to win. Sebastian Vettel 2017, Daniel Ricciardo in 2018, Leclerc in 2019, but that wasn't because really of the start, it was for other issues. Valtteri Bottas in 2021 was on pole. He ended up spinning by the apex of turn 1. And obviously last year, Leclerc started on pole, and by the exit of the first couple corners, was in second and had a broken front wing. So pole position is a bit of a curse. But that's the thing with this track, and I guess it makes it interesting for the start, is obviously you try to go as quick as you can, but you almost don't want to, in a way. You want to be quick, but you don't want to be too quick, because you don't want to be giving everyone a toe down to turn one. And the other thing with McLaren is obviously if they get pole with Lando, McLaren are one of the slowest teams in a straight line. So you've also got that added on top of the fact that if they get pole, they'll be giving everyone a slipstream down to turn one. When Ferrari last year, when they were on the front row, Ferrari, they had probably the best straight line speed of any team. So that limited the blow, even though their start last year was still pretty bad from the front row. But again, if you're McLaren, it's going to be even worse considering their lack of straight line speed. So, yeah. If you're a Lando Norris fan, if you get pole, do not jump the gun and start celebrating, a lot, because, Lando could be third or fourth at the exit of turn one tomorrow. But a shame for that Tsunoda crash. That's a shame for Lawson, especially there, because I think Lawson definitely could have got into Q3. Obviously, Tsunoda could have got in, but he crashed and fucked up at the end of the day. But we look into the garage of Lando Norris, who looks super focused. And there is, on the broadcast, Alexander Albon into Q3 yet again in 2024. And look at how qualifying has gone so far. There's no reason Alex Albon can't be, say, 7th on the grid, which would be obviously a superb result. And a big result if Williams were to get that in the race. Could put them in the fight with Haas and Racing Bulls, because Williams are only 20 points behind that fight. And obviously, if Williams go and score 6 points, it could could pull them into that fight slightly as we get to the end of the season. And we still have obviously another 4 races to go after this weekend. And a reminder, by the way, that tomorrow I will not be doing a race watch along, because the races normally here in Mexico are boring. And also, because of how busy I am with uni work at the minute, I need to save some energy. So, yeah, I won't be live for the race tomorrow, but I will be covering what happens in this Grand Prix tomorrow in my podcast, which will be uploaded on Monday night. So make sure to check that out if you want to hear my thoughts on the Mexico City Grand Prix. And then next Saturday and Sunday, I will be live for both qualifying and the race. And I'll be live at, I think, what time would it be? Let me just check the timings of the sessions for next week in Sao Paulo. So I'll be live at 4:30 p.m. UK time next Saturday for the qualifying watch along, and then live at 3 p.m. UK time next Sunday for the race watch along. And then, as usual, the day after the race, I'll upload my podcast reviewing the events. So plenty of content coming your way, and of course, after the triple header is complete, we've still got Las Vegas in 3 weeks, as Q3 is going to start in, I think, 4 minutes' time. They've just said race control. So we will be underway shortly. But yeah, Las Vegas in 3 weeks. And then a couple weeks after that is the Qatar Grand Prix. And then a week after that is Abu Dhabi. And then that's it. Until pre-season testing at the end of February. I remember, of course, the first race of the season in Melbourne starts the F1 season in 2025 starts a couple weeks later than this year did. But it does at least start in the rightful home of the first race of a season. But yeah, we'll be underway pretty soon here. Still plenty of fans in the grandstand. They've not all abandoned ship after Sergio Perez got knocked out. And obviously Perez will start the race 18th. As still, yeah, a lot of fans in the grandstand we can see doing a Mexican wave. I was just thinking with Piastri and Perez, who is more likely to start from the pit lane tomorrow? And surely it would have to be Sergio Perez because he's more likely to not be happy with his setup, which would cause them to break Parc Ferme. I think with Piastri, I think they'll probably keep him on the grid because I think Oscar is probably happy with the setup. It's just that, he didn't deliver in qualifying. But Perez, I can see starting from the pit lane tomorrow. There's plenty of fans on the balcony there just above. The Ferrari pits, obviously they're the VIPs. As Q3 will start in about 45 seconds time. I'll sync up the timer at the 11-minute mark as usual. But yeah, for me, Lando Norris is the clear favourite for pole position here. But what do Ferrari and Max Verstappen have up their sleeve? Mercedes don't have anything up their sleeve. I think they'll be satisfied to be locking out the third row of the grid if they can do that, given their lack of pace. As Q3 is now underway. So 12 minutes to go in qualifying. Who will win the shootout in Mexico? Last year it was Leclerc. The year before, Max Verstappen. Can Lando Norris take his first pole in Mexico? We'll find out. But Max Verstappen, the king of Mexico, when it comes to winning this Grand Prix, is already out of his pit box. But yeah, I'll just sync up the timer and then I'll come to the pole and finish that up before we get into these laps. As Verstappen comes out onto track, Kevin Magnussen is the first car to have got out onto the track. And there you go. 11 minutes remain in qualifying. So, let me just finish up this poll. 695 votes on the question of who do you think will take pole position in Mexico? And 36% of you voted for Lando Norris, who, again, I believe will get pole as well. 29% went for Max Verstappen. And then 25% of you went for Charles Leclerc, with 9% going for Carlos Sainz. Thanks for voting. Make sure to stick around, though, obviously, for these final 10 minutes of qualifying, but also stick around for a few minutes after qualifying finishes, because I will ask you guys again another question in the and set up another poll where I'll ask you who the driver of the day is. I think Albon and Gasly have already got themselves into that vote for driver of the day. And obviously, whoever the pole position man is will be in there. But we'll see who that is. And remember, I said pole position, I think, will be a 1:15.7. I think that's the absolute best lap time you can do here. Let's find out if that's the case. As Max Verstappen, the world champion, starts his first attempt at pole position. Red Bull not very successful at getting pole here in Mexico, but they've always delivered when it matters on race day. But Max looking good so far. Car is doing what he wants it to do, and he has gone quicker in the first sector than Norris, but that's not really a surprise. He would have expected that. It's the middle and final sector where it really matters. As Verstappen, 56.6 for the middle sector, as Kevin Magnussen does his first lap time, and he goes obviously quickest. Nico Hülkenberg goes ahead of him. And here comes Max Verstappen. What's the lap time? It's a 1:16.3, and that definitely is not a pole position lap time. Here comes Lando Norris, who has not done a purple sector. Can he produce the goods in the final sector? No, he can't. A 1:16.9, 0.6 of a second slower than Verstappen. Where has the pace gone there? Complete evaporation. As Albon goes up to third and ahead of the two Haas's. Carlos Sainz, by the way, has done a purple first sector. Leclerc has done the middle sector, and he's only a 10th off Verstappen. Ferrari having a big push here for pole. As Gasly goes up to third and ahead of the other midfield runners. Here comes Leclerc. And he just misses out 0.5 slower than Verstappen, even though he did a purple final sector. Here comes Carlos Sainz. And Carlos Sainz, by 0.3 of a second, puts it on pole position for now. As Max Verstappen has had his time deleted for track limit violations. As Russell goes up to what is now third, and Lewis Hamilton goes up to what is now fourth ahead of Lando Norris. So Max Verstappen is now down to P10. And yeah, I thought it at the time, but I didn't say it, but I thought he jumped turn 2 a bit too aggressively like Leclerc did earlier, and he did. So Max Verstappen now 10th, and he really is at risk here of not getting his qualifying done properly, because if there is a red flag on this final run, he is screwed. But with one run to go, it is Ferrari locking out the front row, and it's Carlos Sainz on provisional pole, 3.5 of a second clear of Charles Leclerc. George Russell third, Lewis Hamilton fourth. Mercedes would be insanely happy with that. Lando Norris fifth. I hope he was on old tyres, because that is a shocking effort. Pierre Gasly for the minute in sixth. Albon seventh. Hülkenberg eighth. And Magnussen in ninth. As Hamilton saying the car definitely feels different in qualifying compared to practice 3. Maybe in a good way, I'm not sure. But third and fourth at the minute for Mercedes, that again, they will be very happy with something like that. But it's funny with Sainz. He is like this, just out of nowhere, comes out and just puts it on pole. That's kind of what he does when he gets pole. But yeah, Ferrari at the minute in the same positions they were in on the grid at this Grand Prix last year, but it's Sainz ahead of Leclerc. But for Ferrari, as long as they get the front row, I don't think they'll care who's on pole. Because obviously tomorrow it's all about fending off the others down to turn one. Yeah, brilliant lap from Sainz, but surely Leclerc can at least close the gap because 3.5 tenths is a lot between Sainz and Leclerc around a 76-second lap. But really, I think what we're looking out for in this final run is Lando Norris and Max Verstappen. What are they going to do? Lando Norris surely cannot end up where he is. I mean, it wouldn't be a complete disaster, but it would be a poor result nonetheless. And for Max Verstappen, obviously, if he ends up P10 and gets unlucky with any red flags, he will be very pissed off. But with 3.5 minutes left, it is time to begin those final runs. And let's find out who will be King of Mexico City. As all the cars slowly trundle out for pit lane. Of course, they don't want to kill their tyres on the outlap. But I still, as I said, let me start again. A 1:15.7 is still, I think, the best lap time you could possibly do in Q3. So there is room for improvement, but can Norris or Verstappen find that level of improvement to take pole position away from the Scuderia? As Verstappen, we're seeing slowly come out of the pit lane. He's got Lando Norris just behind him, who looks like he's trying to overtake Verstappen out of the pit lane. As Mercedes have still got their cars in the pits, which is not necessarily a bad thing at the moment. I mean, they've still got time to get out there and do a lap. But yeah, let's find out on these final runs who's got what. And that's the beauty of qualifying, especially with how competitive the field is in Formula One at the moment in 2024. As this is a visor cam we're seeing on the broadcast from Lando Norris. And for Lando, he just needs to go out there and bang in his best lap, and then we'll, see where that ends up. But he can definitely do better than that. That is not even the quickest lap time he's done this weekend. So Lando could definitely go at least, I think, half a second quicker. But whether he will, we will find out as the Monegasque Charles Leclerc starts his final attempt at pole and his final attempt at taking his third pole position in Mexico. And into turn one he comes. Just got to make sure he doesn't cut the track limits at turn two. Kept it all neat and tidy through there. Mercedes, by the way, are out there on outlaps. They'll be fine. As purple first sector for Leclerc. About half a tenth up on Sainz. But Sainz does even better than that. So very close between the two Ferrari drivers. Verstappen about to complete the first sector. And it's a personal best, but it's not as good as the Ferraris. As Leclerc, what has he done for the middle sector? As Albon has gone up to 7th. And Kevin Magnussen has gone up to 5th place. He'll be hoping for a red flag. As Carlos Sainz does a purple middle sector as well. He's going too quick for his teammate as Pierre Gasly goes up to 6th. Leclerc goes quicker but stays in 2nd. Here comes Carlos Sainz. And he does go quicker, a 1:15.9. Can anyone beat that? I'm not sure they can. Lando Norris, though, has done a purple middle sector. So maybe he could, as Max Verstappen goes 2nd. He splits the Ferraris. What can Norris do? Can he get onto the top 3 of the grid? We're about to find out. He goes 3rd, which is not the best he could have got today, but it's not the end of the world for tomorrow. It's a pretty good, actually, starting position for tomorrow. But we still have the 2 Mercedes out there. But the 2 Mercedes are not exactly lighting up the timing screens. As George Russell stays in 5th, a 10th of a second slower than Leclerc and Norris. And Lewis Hamilton stays in 6th. So Mercedes confirming that they have the 4th fastest car here. But 3rd row lockout, still good for them. But there you go. Qualifying is finished and Ferrari are on pole. But it's Carlos Sainz on pole position. Max Verstappen 2nd. Lando Norris 3rd. 3 different teams in the top 3 and 3 different power units as well. The start tomorrow is going to be exciting. Leclerc 4th. He'll be disappointed by that. Russell 5th. Hamilton 6th. Magnussen 7th. Brilliant result for him. Gasly 8th. What a result for him. Albon 9th. Great result for him. And Nico Hulkenberg in P10. And the rest of the order, Yuki Tsunoda in 11th. Liam Lawson 12th. Fernando Alonso 13th. Lance Stroll 14th. Valtteri Bottas 15th. Franco Colapinto 16th. Oscar Piastri 17th, Sergio Perez 18th, Esteban Ocon 19th, and Zhou Guanyu will line up at the very back of the field. But there you go, guys. And as Rooksfoot says in the chat, a smooth operation by Carlos Sainz. But let me just quickly start up the poll to ask you guys, who do you think is driver of the day for qualifying in Mexico? And your options will be Carlos Sainz, Max Verstappen, and then the other 2 options, as I said earlier, Pierre Gasly and Alexander Albon. Looney Classic saying in chat, Lando did not maximise today again. True, but again, 3rd on the grid for the start is not a bad place to be. So he might be in a much better place at turn 1 tomorrow. But there you go, guys. Let me know, who do you think is driver of the day for qualifying in Mexico? For me, it's between Sainz and let me get up the gaps. Yeah, Sainz was a couple tenths of a second ahead of Verstappen. You know what? I'm going to go Pierre Gasly as my driver of the day. Purely because, you know, his teammate down in 19th. And I don't think that Alpine was as quick as what Gasly, you know, put that car in today. So, yeah. I'm going to say Pierre Gasly. Out of the front runners, though, I would say Carlos Sainz. Out of that top 6 was the best. And literally, of course, was the best. As we're seeing a replay of Lewis Hamilton towards the end of his lap. And the car looking like a speedboat in the final few corners. Jumping around all over the place. But, yeah, that was a great session. And it ended up with a surprise pole position. I don't think really... I mean, you guys barely voted for Carlos Sainz as your, pole position man. But as as I've said before with Carlos, he when he gets pole, he just pops up and gets pole. He's never really expected to. So, yeah. But again, with Lando Norris, we'll have to see tomorrow whether his qualifying result of third was a bad one, because he might end up being first at the first corner. It could happen if he gets a good enough start. So we will see tomorrow. But if Max Verstappen gets a good enough start and passes Sainz and gets into the lead, and Lando Norris is in, third or fourth or whatever, then I think Lando is going to have a, very hard race in terms of being able to beat Max Verstappen on track. If Lando's going to beat Verstappen tomorrow, he has to get ahead at the start of Max. If he doesn't, I think Max will just keep ahead, because it is pretty hard to overtake at this track, as we know. And as long as Max, it has reasonable pace, then he will be fine. Show Mercedes and Red Bull what they are losing by signing rookies and underperformers. I mean, with Mercedes, I still think they've gone with the right lineup, because I think Antonelli is better in terms of a talent than Carlos Sainz. I know he's he's a young driver, but he is very talented. I think with Ferrari, you could say maybe they've made a mistake replacing him with Lewis Hamilton in terms of pure performance, because this season, Carlos Sainz has been performing a lot more to the, to maybe to the best of what the car can do, maybe than you can say that Lewis Hamilton has. Woden says the Max is driver of the day. He had the pressure on and dealt with it again. I think he deserves a massive shout out as well for Verstappen, because, again, Red Bull did not have the fastest car today. And I said coming into qualifying that I didn't really think a front row was possible for Verstappen, but there you go. Proved me wrong and ended up second. Francisco says happy with Sainz on pole. I just can't wait to see what happens at the start tomorrow. Let me read out a few more comments before I come to the end of the stream, which are not going to be far away from, guys, because it is late here in the UK. It's 11:15. So, yeah, I'll be coming off in a few moments. And it's that late that the clocks change in, I think, 3 hours. So make sure to remember that if you're in the UK, that I think at 2 a.m. we go back to 1 a.m. So, yeah. Thank God that won't be an issue for me tomorrow, obviously not streaming. Nicholas says, yeah, I mean, Kimi's a young guy, yeah, but still, he'll be pretty good. Let's just see how things turn out first. Exactly. Turbo Power says, that's what we wanted, Max and Norris down to turn one. Let's see if it ends well. Lando has said that he's going to change his approach when it comes to racing Max. The only thing I think he means by that is he's going to be more aggressive. So we could very well see tears at the first corner like we did last year with Perez. I hope we don't, but it's very much possible. Hans Garning, I think it is. Says P7, go Magnussen. Yeah, brilliant performance by Magnussen. And really, given the pace of the Haas, he should finish there. Well, should finish there. Maybe not 7th, because obviously Piastri is going to be pretty quick coming through the pack. But he should definitely be aiming for 8th place at the very least. Murphy Moses, unbelievable time. Sainz, yeah. Carlos, the only driver to do a 1 minute 15. Did a 1:15.9. Verstappen was only able to do, I think, a 16.0, was it? So, yeah, that's what it takes to get pole sometimes. But I think I'll finish up the poll in the chat because there is a clear winner. And with 24 votes, I asked you guys who do you think driver of the day is for qualifying in Mexico, and 62% of you have voted for Carlos Sainz. And then we have Max Verstappen, 25% of the vote in second, Pierre Gasly on 8% of the vote in third, and Alex Albon at the last of those four on 4%, as Rooks reminds me that Max actually did a 1:16.1. But yeah, brilliant qualifying session. Like I said, I won't be live tomorrow because really the race is all going to come down to the first corner, and I'm not going to do a stream just to watch the first corner because, you know, that's boring. But yeah, we'll see what happens tomorrow. And like I said, I will review the events of the Mexican Grand Prix in my podcast, and that will be uploaded on Monday evening in pretty much 2 days from now around this time. So make sure to stick around on the channel for that. Before you go, make sure to subscribe for more content like this and smash the like button before we go if you haven't already. Let's try and get the stream up to 100 likes. That'd be great if we could do that. And as well, make sure to check out other videos on the channel and join my Discord server, link below in the description for more content like this. But yeah, hope you guys enjoy the race tomorrow. And until my next live stream, which will be next Saturday for the qualifying watch along for the Sao Paulo Grand Prix, and until my podcast reviewing whatever craziness goes on tomorrow, which will be uploaded on Monday evening, it has been me, Chazza HD. Goodbye.